In today's episode of Locked On Pistons podcast, I'm answering all the questions that you guys have sent in for today's version of the Mailbag. Let's get right into it.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you're one of the 50% of people who are watching this on YouTube and haven't hit the subscribe button already, or if you simply just listen to this on the podcast and haven't hit the subscribe button at our YouTube channel, it's the best way to support the podcast. Head over there at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button again. Best way to support the podcast, and I'd really appreciate it. But on today's episode, we're answering all the questions that you guys have sent in. We got all kinds of questions. We got some fun ones that we'll answer at the very end of the podcast that don't have too much to do with the Pistons. So I'll save those at the very end. But let's go ahead and get right into it and answer some of these questions that you guys have sent in for today's episode. So I went through all of them. I'm picking this one first because I've gotten a few of you guys who have reached out to me asking about these specific players. I haven't talked about them for a reason, but I figure, since it's a mailbag, we'll go ahead and talk about it. So this one's on Twitter from Jamera. He says, what do you think about the Pistons pursuing Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal when free agency begins? And would you offer a max contract to either one of these guys? One, yes, I would offer both of these guys a max contract if the Pistons felt like they had a chance at getting them and they were willing to accept a meeting with the Pistons and accept an offer. Yes, I think both those guys are worth a max contract, especially for the Pistons. If the Pistons could get both of those guys, or not both of those guys, but one of those guys, I think they would feel extremely happy about where they're going moving forward. I think both of those guys fit exactly what everyone wants next to Cade Cunningham. Now, I haven't talked about either of these guys because I don't think it's possible at all. I don't think it's realistic to even talk about it. Zach LaVine might leave the Bulls, but he's not leaving the Chicago Bulls, who just make the playoffs and have a promising future, possibly, to go to Detroit. Like, it's not going to happen. He's not going to make a move like that. If he wanted to go to a team like Detroit, he'd just stay where he's at in Chicago. If he leaves Chicago, it's going to be to go to one of the big name markets or a team that's ready to win a championship, like LA Lakers. And I don't even know any other teams that could possibly be interested in him. But it's not going to be Detroit. And as far as Bradley Beal goes, his situation is just so murky that I don't. One day he's saying that he's staying with the Wizards. One day they're saying he's not leaving. But again, if Bradley Beal did decide to leave the Washington Wizards, it wouldn't be because he wants to go to another rebuilding team or another team that's not close to winning a championship. If that's the case, he'd just simply again stay with Washington and go through the process with there because they're probably closer than the Pistons are right now. So I don't think it makes any sense for. And when I say closer, I mean they're further ahead in quote unquote their rebuild than the Pistons are. Pistons are like 2 years into theirs. Bradley Beal probably feels like, especially with Kristaps now, that they're have a better chance of competing sooner than the Pistons do. So it doesn't make either sense for either of those guys to pursue the Pistons or be interested in the Pistons or accept an offer from the Pistons. I just don't think it's very realistic at all to think that the Pistons could even get them to accept an offer for them. So that's why I haven't talked about those guys. Are they worth max contracts from Detroit? Yeah. But I haven't talked about them at all because, again, it's just not realistic in my head that either of them are even a legit possibility, even a little bit. But let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Now, this is a question. There's a fly flying around my room, and he's really getting on my nerves. Okay, the next question is, I picked this one to be next because there's a little bit of confusion about a podcast I had a few days ago, and a lot of you guys have been asking about it, so I picked this one next on purpose as well. So this one's from Return of the Bad Boys. He says, everyone's talking about the Pistons using their cap money to sign people, but who are targets that we could trade for, be it one-year tryouts, example, D'Angelo Russell, or helping some team cut some cap space for this year, shifting our free agency spending spree to next year or the year after? So I'm going to answer this question by kind of taking it into a different angle here. A few podcasts ago, I mentioned the possibility of the Pistons trading for D'Angelo Russell, and everyone was freaking out, saying, oh, why would you give up so many assets for D'Angelo Russell? D'Angelo Russell isn't that good. You see how he played in the playoffs. We don't want to give up assets. We don't want to skip steps in our rebuild to go after D'Angelo Russell. First of all, it's not skipping steps. As Return of the Bad Boys stated in this tweet and this question, it would be a one-year tryout. And the thing is, if you were to go after it doesn't have to be D'Angelo Russell, but a player like D'Angelo Russell, who's on a 1-year big contract that happens to fit the archetype that you are wanting to test out next to Cade Cunningham, my preference, and I guess this answers your question, Return of the Bad Boys, I would be interested in doing that because I'd rather trade for D'Angelo Russell, trade Jeremy Grant or something for D'Angelo Russell if that were to be accepted. I would rather do that and have D'Angelo Russell next to Cade Cunningham for a year. Try it out. If he fits well next to Cade, you can extend him at the or before the deadline, or you can extend him after the year. If it doesn't work out, you can trade him at the deadline, or you can simply let the year play out, and now you got $31 million in cap space. The other option, though, which is the beginning part of your question, Return of the Bad Boys, is if the Pistons don't do something like that, it sounds like they're likely to use their money on a long-term contract that is probably going to be overpaid for a guy like Jalen Brunson or a guy like Colin Sexton. I would rather take the 1-year tryout with D'Angelo Russell, and if it doesn't work out, still have my future flexibility in cap room than sign a long-term guy like Jalen Brunson, Colin Sexton, who I think you'd be overpaying for. I'm not a big fan of anyways. I think that the D'Lo move makes more sense to do so. And it's not just D'Lo. Any other guy you go out there that wouldn't, require a long-term contract, something you can kind of test out the scoring archetype next to Cade Cunningham that they're trying to do, it sounds like. I think that would make a lot of sense. So I think the targets that you asked who would be the targets. D'Angelo Russell is an interesting target for me if they're actually shopping him. And I just listed the reasons why. So I think that would be cool to watch. And we've talked about a few lower key guys. One of the guys I've mentioned as a backup center, possibly like JaVale McGee or Andre Drummond, something like that. I think that's some underrated signings. Possibly Lonnie Walker, maybe Malik Monk. I've seen Malik Monk mentioned a lot amongst the Pistons community. But those are the kind of names I'm thinking of as low-key signings if the Pistons decide not to splash this offseason, which I've completely convinced myself they should not do. But when we come back, we'll answer the rest of your guys' questions that you guys have sent in. But first, I have to tell you guys about one of our sponsors. First up, let me tell you a little bit about Built Bar. Imagine dipping your finger into the plastic tub of birthday cake frosting and then opening your eyes and realizing that it was only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. That is what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built Bar. Now, Built Bar just sent this in to me. I literally just got it today. I have a box in right next to me full of these. And I tried them. I actually like them. They're they're probably second behind the peanut butter flavor. It tastes really well, or really good. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I wouldn't suggest it over the peanut butter flavor, but the birthday cake puffs, it's amazing. Make every day your birthday with Built's birthday cake puff. Built has taken delicious experience of biting into a fresh slice of birthday cake and enrobed it in 100% white chocolate and added sprinkles. With 150 calories, 16 grams of protein, and only 9 grams of sugar, this limited time flavor is an amazing option if you are looking for a healthy way to get flavor and variety in your day. All puff Built bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means with Built, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And they made it with a special protein with your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. So go to Built.com to get birthday cake puffs now. And when you go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to our YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the podcast. Again, I would really appreciate it. Let's continue answering your guys' questions here. This one is from Heavy D on Twitter. It says, if Boston loses the series against the Milwaukee Bucks, which, by the way, I'm recording this right after Boston forced the Game 7, that game was a classic. Whew. Man, Giannis and Jason Tatum were going crazy in that game. I hope you guys are watching the playoffs. The playoffs have been amazing. But anyways, he asked, do you see the possibility of the Pistons possibly going after Jaylen Brown or Boston considering to move Jaylen Brown? And if so, how do you feel about Grant, Bay, or something else centered around Brown? One, I don't think Boston, even if they lose, would consider moving Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum. I don't think it would make any sense. They had one of the best years they've had together all their entire careers this year. As of right now, after Game 6, I mean, you could make an argument they look like the best team in the NBA. They played like the best team in the NBA over the last 4 months of the season. So I really don't think they would even consider moving that guy. And especially, I don't think they would consider moving him for Jeremy Grant or Sadiq Bey. The only way they're moving one of those guys is if they feel like that they need an upgrade at the position. They're going to package Jaylen Brown possibly with someone else. to get someone that's better to take them to the next level. I highly doubt that they would even consider moving Jaylen Brown. Definitely, they would not consider moving him for a downgrade at Jeremy Grant or Sadiq Bey. So I don't think Jaylen Brown is a realistic option either. Next question is from Piston of the Day. It says, any thoughts on the Pistons pursuing Tobias Harris this offseason by trading Jeremy Grant and acquiring future assets from Philadelphia in the process? So I've seen some of you guys suggest, not just Tobias, but I've seen a lot of you guys suggest the Pistons take on a big contract and, acquire assets with it. I get the idea. I'm not for it, though. I'm not interested in the Pistons, taking on a massive contract right now at this point. Now with Cade Cunningham, I feel like they're in the mode where they should be acquiring, players, guys who are ready to play. And I don't think the assets that Philadelphia would even give up with Tobias Harris would make it worth it. Also, Tobias is getting paid a hell of a lot of money. We're not talking about like 20 million, 25 million. He's going to be making $37 and $39 million a year. And that's going to hamstring your cap space. Even with unless they're giving you like some insane asset value, which I don't think they're going to do. They wouldn't do that. I don't think it would be worth it. The Pistons need to have as much cap space and as much cap flexibility to build around Cade Cunningham. Yes, I get the idea of wanting to have more draft picks to have more cracks at the apple, but Philadelphia's picks aren't going to be that intriguing. And unless they're giving up like Tyrese Maxey with Tobias Harris, which isn't happening, I'm not interested in that. Overall, the idea of taking a bigger contract to absorb some picks, I would have been interested in that 2 years ago when the Pistons initially started their rebuild. Now that they got Cade and like 3 other young guys right now, plus another young guy that they're going to be getting at the top of the draft, plus whoever they add in free agency this offseason with the cap space they have, plus the more cap space that they'll likely have a year from now too, depending on what they do. I like where they're at right now. I don't want to absorb any bigger contracts. I like the cap flexibility. I like the guy that they have right now in Cade and trying to surround him with better players. I think they've moved past, in my opinion, I feel like they've moved past the point of just acquiring late second-round picks or late first-round picks and just trying to get as many cracks at the apple kind of thing. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be getting picks, but they shouldn't be doing let me clear it up. They shouldn't be taking on huge contracts to get picks. That's where I'm at right now. Unless they believe that huge contract, like if Tobias was like a last addition to the Pistons squad, they feel like, okay, well, Tobias is getting overpaid, but he's a really good player and he would take us to the next step that we're trying to get to, and we're going to get picks for him, then it would make sense. I don't think they're at that spot right now. So maybe in like 2 years, if they have the cap space to do it, and they're like, okay, Tobias can help us become a better contender in the East. We got some other pieces. Now Tobias could help. We have cap space for it, blah, blah, blah. Then I think it would make sense. Right now, I don't think it would make sense. So I'm against it for that reason. Let me know what you guys think about that whole idea of taking, not just Tobias, but just the idea of taking bigger contracts to absorb some possible draft assets as well. Next question is centered around John Wall, who I haven't heard about in what feels like forever. Like, I forgot this dude even plays basketball anymore. So this question is kind of along the same lines. This is from Craig G. He says, would you take the trade of John Wall and the Rockets 2023 and 2025 first round picks? Why or why not? So now, this one is different because I'm imagining the Houston Rockets first round picks will be pretty high. At least in 2023. Maybe 2025, it won't be as good, hopefully, for them. We don't really care, but hopefully for them, it won't be as bad. But 2023 and 2025 first-round picks from Houston, I think, are actually pretty valuable. John Wall, I think, is an okay, at the very least, is still an NBA player. I actually liked what I saw from him in his last season with Houston. I don't think he's the same guy from Washington, and he definitely needs to have his usage cut. But I think he showed in his last year or the last time he played in Houston that he can still be a contributing player. I don't think that's too crazy to say, to be honest. And the thing I like about John Wall compared to Tobias is that he has one less year on Tobias's contract. Now, the thing that hurts, though, is that John Wall's contract is significantly more expensive. John Wall's at $44 million this year, and then next year he has a player option for $47 million. I don't know if the Pistons would come to a buyout agreement with him or something like that if he were to come to Detroit, because it sounds like that he doesn't really want to come off the bench or play for a losing team, which is why he's not playing in Houston. But this one I would at least consider, and I would get why they take it, because, again, the first-round picks from the Rockets would be, I feel like, much more of significant value than, the assets that Pistons of the Day suggested in his question, with the Philadelphia 76ers. So if I had to make a decision, it would depend if the Pistons feel like they have a free agent this year or next year that they really want. This year's free agency class, I would do it because I don't want any of these free agents. I'd rather take 2 first-round picks than spend a lot of money on any of the guys in this year's free agency class. Now, next year, if the Pistons feel like they have a legitimate chance of one of the top guys next year and they don't want John Wall's contract to ruin that, then, okay, I get that. Again, I understand the idea of not wanting to absorb a big contract. Again, though, I think Rockets first-round picks, their 2 first-round picks, make it at least a little bit more interesting and something to talk about than the Philadelphia 76ers one with Tobias Harris. So that's my thinking right there. Next question would be from, I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it's Asuka Truly on Twitter. I'm sorry about that if I mispronounced it. But it says, would you rather have D'Lo in the backcourt with Kate Cunningham or have him run the bench unit with Killian if the Pistons were to get D'Angelo Russell? I think he 100%, if they did get D'Angelo Russell, he would 100% be starting next to Cade because the primary reason that you'd be wanting to get D'Lo for this one-year tryout is more so maybe not even D'Lo the player. Like maybe, they're completely fine with just letting D'Lo leave after the year. They don't even consider extending him, no matter how he plays. I think the bigger picture is to see that archetype next to Cade Cunningham. Because they want, from all the reports that they're interested in, all the rumors, all the players that they seem to be interested in, they're thinking about having a scoring type of guard next to Cade Cunningham. Now, we've talked about on the podcast different archetypes that I think would be cool next to Cade Cunningham, but I think the rumors are clearly suggesting the Detroit Pistons want a scorer next to Cade. D'Angelo Russell can score the basketball. We talked about in the podcast a few days ago when we were talking about D'Lo. He's one of the best isolation scorers in the NBA. He was in like the 88th percentile. In isolation, he can score the damn basketball. So I think the whole idea behind getting him is to simply see how the archetype works next to Cade. And if it doesn't work next to Cade, and you're like, okay, we mean more of Alonzo Ball or future Killian Hayes type of archetype next to Cade. Okay, then we let D'Lo walk. If D'Lo plays well and the archetype looks really good next to Cade, okay, now you have that guy. You can extend D'Lo after his 1 year, $31 million to apply less money per year, but a longer-term contract if you liked how he played. Or even if you think the archetype looked good next to Cade, but you don't think D'Lo himself is the right person to fill that archetype, then you just let him walk after the year. And then you go get the guy that you feel like would fit that archetype on this team. So I really feel like that would be a good move, to be honest. I'm kind of talking myself into it as the days go on. I think it would make sense. I think it's a low-risk move. I wouldn't do it if you have to give up assets. I think Jeremy Grant for D'Lo or something like that would be fine. Kelly Olynyk, Jeremy Grant for D'Lo, and Jay McDaniels or something. Like I suggested a few days ago, even though Minnesota loves Jay McDaniels, I doubt they do that. But something along those lines, I think it would be really smart for the Pistons to do for the reasons I've suggested thus far. So if they were to pull a trigger on a trade like that for D'Angelo Russell somehow, it wouldn't even make sense to bring him off the bench. You would be doing it for no reason then. It would be no purpose of making the trade. So yes, you 100% would have to start him next to Cade Cunningham because that's the whole point of making the trade. When we come back, we'll answer the rest of the questions that you guys have all sent in. And if you guys want to hear yourselves on the next Mailbag podcast that we'll have next week, send in some questions to my Twitter @KukaHill, or you can comment in the comment section down below on the YouTube channel. Just make sure you put #Mailbag and then ask the question. I'll be sure to try to save it and answer it for the next Mailbag. But let me tell you guys about one of our sponsors real quick before we get back into the Mailbag, and that's BetOnline.net. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is a continuous source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about their trends in action today. And if you head over to BetOnline.net, you'll see that they have baseball and basketball and football, but they have more. They have boxing, golf, hockey, horse racing, martial arts, soccer, and even tennis. And that's not even, I didn't even name all the sports you could be looking at over at BetOnline.net that you could have some fun with. And if you head over to the NBA basketball games, on Sunday, we got 2 Game 7s happening. We got Phoenix, we got Milwaukee. I'm going to go ahead and take Milwaukee in the Game 7 at plus 185, and I will take Phoenix at minus 255 over at BetOnline.net. That's what I'm doing with my money line. Plus 185, Milwaukee, minus 255, Phoenix. That's what I suggest to you guys now. If you guys don't want to take my advice. I understand. I haven't been that great recently, but those are the kind of things you can do over at betonline.net. So again, make sure you head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about their trends and action today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to our YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the podcast. If you want to find another way to support the podcast and you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go down below, leave a 5-star review. I'd really appreciate it. I appreciate all the support you guys show me every single day by making Locked On Pistons your first listen. Again, really appreciate all of that. Let's go ahead and answer a few more of these questions, then we'll wrap up the podcast. This one is from Pack Attack. It says, what is the biggest need for, and by the way, Pack Attack, you're lucky I'm answering your question. I just realized you are a Packers fan. I should have known that because it said Pack Attack. I'm slow. But I see the Packers as your profile picture. You're lucky I'm answering your question. Green Bay is hated around here, and Aaron Rodgers 100% is hated around here. So consider yourself blessed. I'm answering your question. Anyways, he says, what is the biggest need for the Pistons to make that leap to a playoff team? I think their biggest need, okay, that's a good question because they have a bunch of needs. But if you want me to pick one that I think could launch them into playoff contention, I think it's the big man position, man. I think if they got a legitimate lob threat, a legitimate vertical threat at center that also wasn't a complete liability defensively, like if they got one of those guys, I think that would really change the outcome of the team. I know a lot of people would go off guard next to Cade. They think that's the biggest one. But me personally, I've been saying it for the past year and a half. I think their center position is their biggest weak spot right now. I know a lot of people like Isaiah Stewart, but he's a non-factor offensively. I know people really like Marvin Bagley. I like Marvin Bagley, but he's a complete liability defensively. If you could get someone who like is a fuse of both those guys, someone who's able to play a lob threat, be a vertical threat, and finish around the rim on offense, and be some kind of threat and put pressure on the rim on that end, and then also is able to play defense and not be a complete liability on that end, I think that would really, really, really help this team. You saw after the Pistons got Marvin Bagley, who was a liability defensively, they were playing close to 500 ball at the All-Star break simply because of the vertical threat and the pressure he would put on the rim, how that would open things up for Cade Cunningham and the rest of the team. So I really do believe with everything in me that that's the Pistons' biggest need right now. It's not center, or it's not shooting guard. It's not off guard. It's not a scoring wing. I think their biggest need is a guy at center who can do both those things. But I'm sure some of you guys will disagree with that. I know you guys are very, very loud about the fact that you guys want a scorer next to Cade Cunningham. I get it, man. I get it. I understand it. I'm just saying, though. I think center. I think we saw it last year, man. The Pistons were playing awful basketball before All-Star break. As soon as they got Marvin Bagley, again, who's not even that great defensively, simply having a guy who can put pressure on the rim at the big man position changed life for everyone on the Pistons. Like, it was immediate, drastic improvement. Imagine if you had a guy who could do that and play defense. I think that would change everything for the Pistons. So that's what I believe would be the biggest need for the Pistons if they wanted to go just like that into the playoffs. That's just my opinion, though. Again, I know you guys want that scorer. We'll get that scorer. The Pistons will get them soon. But first, let's get a center who can actually, finish around the rim and play defense. Not one or the other. It's possible to have both, I promise. Next question is going to be from JT Olson. He says, there's obviously been a lot of talk about trading Jeremy Grant, but what would be a good return for Kelly Olynyk in your book? Maybe deal him for a high upside shooting guard prospect like Moses Moody or Cam Thomas. So I don't have a specific name, but I think, Jeremy Grant right now, the Pistons, it sounds like they want multiple picks and a young asset, or a pick and a really good young asset. I think Kelly Olynyk would only need one of those. Like, give us a good pick or give us a young asset that has like legit potential. Just give one of those two. Because if you're trading for Kelly Olynyk, you're probably a contending team. So you don't have use for either like a nice pick that you possibly could have from another team in your stash, or maybe you want to give us multiple of the picks you have, or you want to give us like a young prospect that's on your team who isn't really going to make a difference for a contending team, that's not ready to contribute for a contending team, but a team like the Pistons who's rebuilding and collecting young talent for the future would love to have. Just get one of those things. One of them, I think that right there is the value of Kelly Olynyk. Even though I think he had a down year this past year because of injuries and contracting COVID, I think everyone around the NBA would probably like to have Kelly Olynyk on their team. He's a nice offensive player, can shoot the ball, nice playmaker, nice pass for his position. Even though he's not a great defensive player, I actually feel like sometimes when he's like actually engaged, he's a smart team defender. I think he would be even more engaged like on a contending team and would have less spurts of just not caring or not running around on defense if he was on a team that actually was playing for something. Next question is going to be from, excuse me. I just lost it. Where'd it go? Right here. This one's also from Asuka Truly. It says, do you believe Killian could break out for a most improved candidate next season? You guys will remember that last year I said he could be a most improved candidate and it didn't go well. But I'm doing it again this year. Doing it again. I believe he can be most improved this next year. I believe it. I believe it, man. What he showed me at the end of the year, specifically the second half of the season, where I was telling you guys, even though the numbers weren't matching, I was telling y'all that he was changing his mindset. He was being more aggressive getting to the rim. And I told you guys that would eventually start to show in the box score. It wouldn't show immediately, but it definitely would start showing in the box score eventually if he continued to play like that. And what did we see the last month and a half of the season? It started to show in the box score. We started to see him do things he wasn't always doing. He started to get to the rim at a much higher rate than he ever did in his career, like Amari Sankofa II wrote about in his article for the Detroit Free Press. Like, he was playing really well. And I can see him if he gets an opportunity to do so next year. Now, he may just not even have the opportunity to do it. But if he gets the opportunity to do it and he continues to put work in this offseason and comes back next year with that kind of aggression immediately, Yep. Most improved candidate. Amen. You guys can record this. You guys can save it. You guys can bookmark it and come back to me in a year and laugh at me again, like you guys probably did this past season. That's fine. That's all right. What did Michael Jordan say? Anyone can talk when they're ahead, but when you're losing, that's where it starts. That right there. That's basically where I'm at right there. I'm down. I'm losing. But it's a sign of a good man if you can talk. If you can talk when you're down. And we're down over here a little bit with the Killian fan club. We're down a little bit with the Killian most improved candidate. But I'm not going down with it. I think he can do it next year. I do. And this is one of the fun questions real quick. And then we'll wrap up the podcast. This one's from Detroit Pistons 2025 NBA champs. I appreciate your optimism on Twitter. It says, thoughts on the new Kendrick Lamar album. So I haven't finished the Kendrick Lamar album. I've listened to about 4 or 5 songs on it. I like what I'm hearing. The production seems really cool. I can tell this is an album that I'm going to have to listen to multiple times. A few songs I'm going to listen to multiple times before you can really grasp like the full meaning of his album. You'll catch some things, but I feel like you won't really be able to capture the full thing. At least you listen multiple times. I really like what I've seen thus far from his album. I'm not a big Kendrick fan. I've never been a big Kendrick fan. I respect him. I know how great of a rapper he is and how good of a lyricist and storyteller he is. But me personally, I've just never really been a big fan of his music. However, I do like what I've heard thus far. I'm definitely going to be finishing it probably tonight after this podcast. But so far, I like it. I like it. I think it's good. I think it's good stuff. I've seen a lot of people, they seem to like it too. So I really like the song that he put out right before that, the meaning and the storytelling and the depth of what he was talking about. I really like what he's going here. So I really like the album. I'll be finishing it tonight. So I know some of you guys absolutely hate it when I talk about hip hop on the podcast. That's why I waited to talk about this till the very end of the podcast. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for sending in all your guys' questions. If you guys want to be heard on the next podcast, send a question over to me at Kookahill on Twitter or comment down below in the YouTube section. Just make sure you put hashtag mailbag so I know that's what it's for, and I'll be sure to try to save it for the upcoming mailbag next week. But until then, I'll see you guys later. Again, thank you. Actually, I almost forgot my whole, what I had to do when we end the podcast. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. Make sure you make Locked On NBA your second listen of every single day, from the first jump ball of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the finals. Locked On experts take you deep inside the playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. Again, I really hope you guys are going to watch these 2 Game 7s on Sunday and possibly another Game 7 if Golden State loses this game that's currently being played while I'm recording this podcast. So make sure you guys are watching these playoffs. They're amazing. It's been a lot of fun. You can probably take away some things when looking at the Pistons' future if you watch these playoffs. So, but until Monday, I'll see you guys then. Stay safe. Enjoy the playoffs. And I'll see you guys then. Peace out, everybody.